Yeah, thanks, Zoe. Yeah, thanks, everyone. This was a terrific discussion. Really enjoyed a lot of the comments that each one of you made and the presentations that you made. Just thinking about what are some of the high-level takeaways for me in this discussion. Clearly, chronic diseases are, by definition, long-lasting, and therefore early detection becomes a key first step. And I think that's where Russ started out with his description of Alzheimer's disease as an example, where early detection could potentially give us a lot of opportunities for intervention and hopefully a long-term better outcome. But yet that's challenged by the complex biology and the lack of easily accessible biomarkers for many of these chronic diseases. So I think the discussion by Jason and Joe about the level of complexity and the technological innovations and public-private partnership that's needed to really get robust biomarkers of the disease, robust biomarkers for the disease progression and response measurements are not trivial, and it takes a lot of work to do that. But I think that's one of the areas where we have opportunity for innovation in chronic disease space. I think to me the other challenges that came out here is that how much of the population that suffers from these, particularly population that are of diverse backgrounds and rural populations, have been underrepresented in a lot of our strategies and in a lot of our discoveries and studies. So Erica made a great point about how that's really critical for many of our for our future discoveries. So I think these are some of the great examples of how we can begin to start to both parcel out chronic disease space, but also approach it through a very systematic way of how we might be able to understand them. I think moving forward, some of the work that's being done with large sort of discovery programs, especially the BRAIN Initiative, is very relevant to so many of the neurological disorders, Alzheimer's included. So in some ways, there are organs such as the brain that we barely understand, and then trying to understand the diseases that affect that becomes even more challenging. So really enjoyed John's presentation of the BRAIN Initiative and how that might help us. Finally, I was really very impressed with Andrew's presentation. I think the idea of using AI becomes very important in this space because we are dealing with, in most cases, very complex biology, probably much more of a systems biology issue than an organ biology issue in many of these chronic diseases. So using AI approaches, using AI-assisted discovery of potential drug molecules and treatments, and then confirming it through clinical and preclinical and clinical areas is a really attractive strategy for some of these chronic diseases. So I think, in a broad sense, the panel today really delivered a lot of the points we were hoping to address and a lot of questions we were hoping to answer in the preclinical and discovery aspects of chronic diseases, particularly for novel therapeutics. So I think we are very much well poised to actually get on to the next panel next week, where we will hope to really focus much more on some of the challenges of clinical trials, challenges of outcome measurements, and how to conduct large-scale sort of treatment trials that would be appropriate and within a reasonable, chance of success to get new therapies. So I will let Carl make a few final remarks, and thank you very much for all of the speakers and all of the participants. This has been a very exciting 4 hours for me. Carl?
Yeah, great. Thanks, Samantha. That's a very good summary. I was kind of putting my thoughts together, and you covered pretty much all of them as well. Maybe a couple of things to add as we're wrapping up here today is, so I kind of sit back and look at all my notes, and I think, okay, what are the big nuggets around how do we incentivize R&D? What did we hear today that could really move the needle on incentivizing getting more people to invest and investigate new drug targets and bring forward molecules that we'll talk about next week in clinical development. And I think it covers everything that you summarized. I really appreciated Russ starting it off, even though we asked him to start first. I really appreciated his first comments where I appreciate you putting the patient voice first. And we've heard that a lot today. I think it's really important that we focus on the patient and the individual needs, and then the public health need, of course, which is the genesis of why we wanted to have this workshop as well. The other thing I heard that really resonated with me was, knowledge de-risks programs. It was a statement that was made earlier today. And we spent a lot of time talking about understanding the biological basis of the disease and the investments in that. And Chi reminded us that in oncology, although we've enjoyed success over the past half to full decade of advances in oncology, those investments started in 1971 with Nixon signing the war on cancer. So it has been a journey there for cancer that's just now culminating in these. So we may have to hopefully not wait another 50 years, but maybe accelerate that down to something much faster. The other things that I really thought were pretty important were, Jason made the point early this morning that I think many people built on, was breaking the large prevalent diseases down to subpopulations. Just trying to find a cure for depression, such a heterogeneous disease, or even diabetes, which is actually quite heterogeneous as well, may not be the solution and may not serve as well in terms of incentivizing future research. I heard a lot of that today from Erica. She was talking about understanding the diversity in trials, and that may be how we can understand the genetic basis of diseases and start to identify those subpopulations that are most likely to respond to drugs, so we can bring forward precision medicines toward these highly prevalent diseases. It's a bit of an oxymoron, but I think that's some beautiful insight that we got today on that. And then a couple other points that I thought was really great. Andrew made a statement that maybe I'm going to quote for a while, and that was, whoever makes best decisions will get more medicines to patients. And he brought forward concepts in AI, and I think intrinsic in that is just quality decision making, objective and high quality decision making. So that's going to be another key piece, I think, here. And then, although not a specific point of conversation, it came, or a topic, but it came up a lot in our conversations, and that was data sharing. I made a text comment here during the middle of the talk, and it reminded me of Harry Truman's quote of, "It's amazing what you can accomplish if you don't care who gets the credit." And pharmaceutical companies aren't really good at this. Right? We like to get the credit, and we like to keep our information under our belts as long as possible. But maybe it's time to change, and maybe we've learned something from COVID, where information was flowing very fast with lack of respect or concern around intellectual property. It was more of, how do we solve the problem? And I think if we could switch to that mindset of how do we solve the problem, then maybe that's a big tipping point as well. So these are just some points that I took that I thought was really helpful today. I really appreciate all the participants in the sessions today, the conveners, the committee that brought together this workshop, as well as the National Academies of Science. I really appreciate all the work that they put into bringing this together, and we couldn't have done this without them. I look forward to next week, where, as ANANTHA, you mentioned, we'll get more into the clinical, translational, late phase development, and regulatory aspects of incentivizing R&D. So I hope you all will be able to come back next Monday and join us for that discussion. Thank you all, and I wish you very a very good evening.